Oh boy, classic point-and-click adventures. A genre which has very often been declared dead, but which has pretty much dominated an entire decade of gaming history. And I'm pretty sure that at least 95% of the people watching this video right now have at least one very fond memory of one of the good old adventure games.
Like one of Tim Schafer's.
So why is that, huh? Well, there's actually a bazillion of reasons for the popularity of adventure games, which would actually fill out at least an entire episode. Probably gonna do that at some point. I should keep that in mind. But let me try to provide a short answer. See, in a time when most video games told stories like
You gotta rescue your princess. Prisoner has been captured. You gotta get her back.
classic point-and-click adventures were able to deliver a complex narrative with fleshed-out characters and beautiful, timeless graphics. And by that, they delivered a cineastic experience that no other genre could compete with. The interesting thing about that is that these games were, in terms of game mechanics, actually pretty simple.
I guess it's mayonnaise, but it looks like used motor oil.
The very core mechanic of classic adventures, which takes up about 91.3% of the gameplay, is the inventory. You pick up items, carry them around, and use them on other items, or persons. And by that, and only by that, you drive forward the narrative. So, to progress further in the game, you need to have the right item in your inventory. Without it, you're screwed. So, here's an example. In The Secret of Monkey Island, when you reach the site of the treasure of Mealy Island, you're supposed to dig it up, the treasure. So in order to do that, you need a shovel in your inventory, right? So if you don't have a shovel in your inventory, you can't dig up the treasure. Pretty straightforward. So if you want to get the treasure, you first got to go back to the city, buy a shovel, get back, and then dig the treasure up.
But that's pretty much an old hat.
So why am I telling you these elementary school basics, huh? Here's my hypothesis. Every single game, no matter the genre, has an inventory system like that. And it happens to be a very helpful game design tool. I call it
the mental inventory.
Hello everybody and welcome to RagnarRox. Today I will be talking about the mental inventory, a game design technique that can help you avoid creating unbalanced and unfair situations in basically any type of game. So, when you're designing a video game, and especially when you're designing challenges for your player to overcome, one of the most important questions you should ask yourself is if the player knows everything he needs to overcome your challenge. Now don't get me wrong, this doesn't necessarily mean that your challenge has to be easy or super obvious, but you want to make sure that the player knows all the mechanics and rules of your game that he needs in that situation. So that A, when he makes a mistake, he always knows what he did wrong, and B, he never gets obstructed in overcoming a challenge by something which should already be elemental to him. If you fail to deliver that, the player will get the feeling of being cheated. It's like playing a game of chess against an advanced opponent without having been told how the pieces even move. You can't focus on developing a strategy, but instead have to concentrate on learning the basic rules. And while you do that, you get your ass kicked. That is far from being fair, but frustrating and daunting. And unless you have a very high frustration tolerance, you'll quit rather sooner than later. The mental inventory is a great method to prevent players from rage quitting your game while keeping your challenges challenging and fair. Try to imagine the player's mind as an inventory in a classic adventure, and the pieces of information, like mechanics and rules of your game, that he learns over the course of your game, are the items you can put in it. This can be virtually anything, very basic things like learning how to jump, understanding the meaning of key colors, learning which buttons to press on the input device, or understanding complex interconnected mechanics. Really, practically anything that the player can know or learn how to do. Now, before things get a little too dry and theoretical, let's take a look at an early stage from the brilliant puzzle platformer Braid, and imagine for a while that we are in the process of designing that stage. I highly recommend having played and solved the game before watching this, because A, it will spoil the puzzle, and B, it gets a lot easier to comprehend when you already know the unique time-bending mechanics of this game. So, if you haven't played it yet, go buy and play it. It's awesome. In this stage, called The Ground Beneath Her Feet, the objective is to acquire the... What? Stop Skyping me, I'm recording a video here. The objective is to acquire the jigsaw piece in the bottom right. The problem is that it's obstructed by this locked door, which can be opened by the key on the bottom left. But the key is in a space that's too tiny for the player to get in. The solution is to move the platform to the left, rewind the time until the very beginning, and let the Goomba walk in there and grab the key for you, since he's small enough to fit in that tiny space. After that you just kill him, grab the key and open the lock. Now, when a player approaches this room for the first time, this puzzle requires him to know a certain amount of things for it to be solvable. Let's take a look at the mental inventory at that point in the game and see if the player has been taught everything he needs to know. Let's start with the very basics to assume we are as stupid as modern AAA developers think we are. Number 1. Does the player know how to move? Answer: yes. Basic movement has been taught on the very first screen of the game. Number 2. Does the player know how to jump and climb? Answer: yes. This mechanic has been introduced to the player in stage 1-1. Number 3. The Goomba will eventually fall into the fiery pit, so the player will have to bring it back to life by rewinding the time. Does the player know how to rewind time? Answer: yes. That has also been taught in World 1, as soon as the player dies for the first time, which is, by design, pretty much inevitable. Number 4. Does the player know that keys open locked doors? That one's rather interesting, because the game designer can assume that the player already knows the connection between keys and locks, because it's an intuitive bias in almost any society around the world. The fact that the key, with its distinctive form, belongs in the keyhole with its distinctive form is an affordance, and the game designer can assume that the vast majority of their players immediately see the connection between those two entities. And for those who happen to never have seen a key and a lock, the first part of World 1-2 is designed so obviously that you pretty much can't get around picking up the key and opening the locked door with it. So yes, the player knows that one too. Number 5. Does the player know how to kill a Goomba? Answer: yes. That has also been taught in the very first room of the game, and it's necessary for the acquisition of some of the earlier jigsaw pieces. Number 6. Does the player know how to manipulate levers? Answer: yes. Has been taught in room 1-3 and is necessary to reach the exit. Number 7. Does the player know what the green glimmer means and that a Goomba is able to pick up and carry a key? Answer: these mechanics were both introduced in the room The Pit, which recurs throughout the entire game and teaches the player new mechanics without having written tutorial in bold neon letters on his proverbial forehead. The room is designed in a way that the Goomba will eventually pick up the key and carry it around, thus making the only logic thing for the player to fall down into the pit, kill the Goomba and grab the key. The player will then eventually realize that the only way out of the pit is by winding back the time, and by doing so, he will observe that the green glowing key sticks to the player. He may not fully understand the mechanic at that time, but he has been shown everything he needs to know at this point. Green glimmering objects behave differently when manipulating time. So, as you see, the game has provided the player with everything he needs. Does that mean that the puzzle is already solved or super obvious for the player?
Hell no!
He still has to deduce that the platform won't be affected by time manipulation because of the green glimmer, and also that he can use the Goomba to get the key for him. That leads to the other side from which you have to look at the mental inventory. Not only do you have to think about what the player has to know, but also what he mustn't know in order for your challenge to still be a challenge. This becomes very obvious in linear puzzle games. Once you solve the puzzle, it won't be a challenge anymore and the player knows too much. So, as we've seen, the mental inventory is a great way to make sure that you have tutorialized your game in the right way. But there are actually dozens of other ways in which you can use the content of the player's mind to improve your gaming experience. We're running a bit out of time, so let me give you at least one short example. Super Metroid for the SNES is a masterpiece of a game in which you explore an open world that will suck you in right from the beginning with its dark, eerie atmosphere, its rewarding exploration and its dense, action-packed gameplay. When I was a kid, I always made sure to wear my brown pants when I played it, you know. But a vast, open-ended world like this, where a lot of backtracking is involved, makes it very easy for the player to get lost. I mean, look at it. It's like a gigantic spider's web you're trapped in. But the designers used a lot of brilliant tricks to make sure you always remember the right places. Take a look at this. When I first stumbled upon this room, I tried to jump up the ledge, but I just couldn't reach it. But this face, oh my god, this face, it creeped me out, but I also wanted to get the hell up there. I eventually had to abandon that room and explore somewhere else. Then, much later in the game, I found the high jump power-up, and when I read the words high jump, the connection was immediately in my head. I instantly saw that creepy face and remembered trying to get up there. I had to get back there. Super Metroid's game designers used my mental inventory on purpose to condition the link between my jumping failure and a particularly creepy feeling to guide my way through their labyrinth. It worked perfectly and it was way more rewarding than having an arrow on screen that always points to my next objective. Hell, I still remember it 20 years later. Damn, it's been so long. Alright, that sums it up for this very first episode. It feels like it's taken me years to finally finish it, but thanks for watching and not falling asleep in the first place. I plan to do a lot more of these, dig deeper into the meat and bones of games and game design, so I'd really appreciate if you left me some comments and critique. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate if you hit the subscribe button down below, but you know how that works. If you want to dive a little deeper into the subject matter, here's a link to some work-in-progress footage of Jonathan Blow's upcoming game The Witness, where he talks a bit more about the mental inventory. He just doesn't use the same term because I invented that term. Psst. If you want to know more about Super Metroid's brilliant game design, take a look at this video from DNSQ from the Game Theorist and or the fake sequelitis by Nintendo Capri Sun. So, keep on playing and see you next time at RagnarRox.